Okay, welcome to One Discussion with William Allen. And tonight I have a very special guest, Mr. Mark James, who is an electrical engineer, who has a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and a Master of Business Administration. So, Mark, how are you doing tonight, man?
Great, man. I'm doing great.
Hey, but before we get started, man, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay, so I spent about 30 years working in engineering after graduating college with a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering. And I worked at a variety of different programs, mainly supporting aerospace and some military type work. So initially I started out doing RF, radio frequency, communications hardware, and moved on more into the system level. And now I'm working in a similar field now, supporting aerospace.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Then during that period of time, I actually went back to school after being out of college for a number of years. Mm-hmm. About 20 years of engineering experience, I decided to go back and pursue a master's in business administration, just to get a feel for how a corporation actually works, not just the technical side, but the business side as well.
Okay, well, man, that's awesome, brother. I tell you what, man, I've always admired you. I admire your work, man. And I tell you what, continue to do the great work that you're doing in the aerospace industry, man, as well as giving financial knowledge to those who really may not understand how this thing works. So tonight, we're going to have a really, really good discussion. And the title of tonight's show is Financial Legacy, Time, Value, and Money. So, Mark, I'm going to give you the floor, man, because there's some things that we have previously discussed earlier that has really touched my heart. So let's start off with time, value, and money. Can you go into depth about time, value, and money?
Right. So we all are aware that, or maybe not all, but we should be aware that $100 tomorrow or a year from now is not the same as $100 today.
Right.
And because you have inflation and all types of factors that decrease the value of that money. And so also it's very important to get a good grasp of that. It's because a lot of people want to invest in different things. So how do you make a decision on how to invest? Well, you have to understand the time value of money. And just a little bit of background, finance basically gives you the tools for making decisions. Finance is not accounting. So it basically gives you the tools for making financial decisions. And one of the things that you learn doing the finance is how money is, the value of money over time. So we always look at cash flows or cash outflows, if you want to, which is negative cash flows. And you have to evaluate those cash flows in terms of today. Since we're making a decision today, if you were decided to make an investment today, you're making a decision. What's the best investment? So that's where the financial tools come in handy.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's good. Now, we also discussed something earlier about financial inheritance, everything that ties into financial inheritance. And one of the things that stood out in our conversation was school loans. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, so I don't want to date myself, but when I went to school, the tuition was roughly a few $100s, excuse me.
Right.
It's roughly a few $100s. So now, as a matter of fact, I went back to school after 10 years and one 3-hour class was $500. Right. So it's a lot more expensive to go to school and achieve some of your goals. So when I left school, with probably a little over $10,000 worth of debt. Whereas now, and that's in a public school. I went to a public school.
Right.
And private schools cost on the order of 40 to 60,000 back when I was attending school.
Absolutely.
So now you might pay close to 100,000 just to go to public type school, not a private school. A private school is going to be even more. Like, don't think about the Harvard or Rice, which is where I'm located in the Houston area. So you don't even think about those schools. Those schools are going to be very expensive to attend. Mm-hmm. You can go to University of Texas, University of Houston, Texas Tech, one of those types of schools. It'll be cheaper, but still students are leaving school with an enormous amount of debt. So it makes it harder to actually accumulate wealth over time when you're starting out your life after 4 or 5 years of school, coming out of school, basically a mortgage. So, and the best way to save and accumulate wealth is to start as early as possible, because compound, and we all know about compound interest. So if you just do something basic, you're going to gain, your money's going to grow over time. And then when you think about investing an initial amount of money, that's also going to grow over time. And most of the people who work in the financial industry, I don't work in it, I'm still in engineering,
right.
But a lot of people who work in the financial industry, they'll tell you that the market will do anywhere between 6 to 8% over X amount of years. So that's why they'll tell you, even when you're investing in your 401k, just leave it in there and ride it out. Ride out the dips, the valleys, the peaks. Don't move it, just ride it out over time, because it's going to produce or yield 6 to 8% over time. So the thing is, though, because kids are graduating from college with so much debt now, that their cash, they got a lot of cash outflow, so they're not don't have the ability to save money. And we talked about that. That places them at a disadvantage, more so than what we had to deal with when we graduated. When I graduated in the 80s. So it's been a while now. It's been about 30 some years now. So that's it puts kids at a disadvantage when they're leaving college with enormous amounts of
right.
debt. And so I think we briefly mentioned informally in our conversation about making decisions, since that's what the financial tools basically help you with. And it really tweaked my interest when I started studying finance and through the MBA program,
right.
Because corporations use these tools for making decisions. And so if you're trying to make a decision on whether to invest in a project, you do something. You can do something as simple as a net present value calculation, where you look at all of your cash flows, your cash out, how much money you're sinking into a project, and what type of cash flows you're going to project in the future, and you bring those cash flows back to the point where you're making a decision, which is the present time. So that's a net present value calculation. Mm-hmm. Same thing can be done even for personal decisions. So like for people who have a great idea and they want to go into business for themselves. But the first thing you do, even no matter how good your idea is, first thing you probably want to do is study the industry, do some research on the industry. And because a lot of ideas, they may be just great ideas, and you may have a lot of competition. So, so you're into a market where you're playing with the big boys
yeah.
So and also ease, the things we studied in school, like the ease of interest, how easy it is for someone to do what you're doing. So you may have a great idea, but it may be inexpensive for someone to enter into that business and compete against you. So those are all things that have to be thought out. And then, all of those decisions have to be done at some point using finance, because you have to find out how much it costs. That's the main thing to get into whatever you want to do. And then you have to project your cash flows over time and do something that we call discounting, which is project those cash flows back to the present value. Again, the net present value calculation that I mentioned. And we're not going to go into details on how to do that tonight, but the one thing that you have to determine whenever you're making an investment, no matter what it is, whether it is you can invest in your college education. I invested in my college education, and so you can invest in a business. Like you yourself, you're a business owner, so you have to figure out how much am I investing? What are my projected cash flows? Right. If I have X amount of dollars, what is my return? Because that's the return is what you're going to use to discount cash flows in the future. So if you say I want to make 6 to 8% off of anything that I invest in, that's your required rate of return that you want to make on your investment, and that's important. It's not just about having a great idea, but you need to determine how much you want to make on your investments. All people do it. Corporations do it. And when they do their calculations, if the net present value is negative, they reject that project.
They sure do.
Decisions. And so most people, you have businesses, people going into businesses, and they don't take the time to do that. And so they may enter in the business and find out later, well, this is not really a profitable as I thought. So that's why it's important to do the homework up front. For this financial decision you make in life, learn to use just some basic financial tools. We do it all the time. Whenever you buy a car, you're using a financial tool to figure out your monthly payments. Or if you take out a loan for a home, you're using basic financial tools. So it's important for people to really get an understanding of those tools and how to make decisions. And one of the examples that we had, we did a number of case studies too during school. But one of the examples we used was a refinance question. Should you refinance? Well, it all depends. A lot of people say, well, yeah, sure, refinance. But it all depends. How long are you going to stay in the house after you refinance? If you stay in the house a short period of time, then it may not be a good idea to refinance because you're going to lose money. Right. So that's where your financial tools come in handy. They basically help you make good financial decisions, which will lead to accumulating wealth over time. And then most of the smart businessmen and investors use these tools all the time, or financial planners doing it for them. So I basically put a presentation together because I think it's important to educate people on some. It's basic formulas, for people who study it in business school, but it's not necessarily common knowledge. So I put together a presentation just to help people, even at just a local church, just kind of share some information that I learned while in graduate school. And it's, I believe it's beneficial to everyone to have a good understanding of the finance part of anything, whether it's personal investment in a business, investment in your education, whatever it is. You should always use those tools to make decisions, because that's how corporations remain in business. They use financial tools to make decisions. They don't just say, I think I got a great idea. If you go into present an idea that you think is great to a CEO, any CEO, without that financial data, they're not gonna waste time even in it. So, there's a show, a great show. I like to watch it sometimes. The Shark Tank. They first thing they'll ask you for is they'll look at the valuation that someone's bringing into their and on the show and saying, why should I invest in this? First thing I'll ask you, how much money have you made? What are your projected monthly cash flows? Mm-hmm. So they're already thinking about this stuff. Like, what are your cash flows? How much can we make in the future? So if I invest some money in this, I'm expecting to get a return. This is basically venture capital. So they're expecting to get a return off an investment. And if they don't think that there's a chance that they're going to get a return from their investment, then they're going to say, no, I'm out. And that's the way we should be in making our financial decisions.
Right.
Do the homework, use the tools.
Right. Well, now you said something that's of interest. You say develop and control your cash flow. So at the end of the day, if you're at a certain age, basically I want to reiterate some things. You're saying that we should start off investing at early ages. Am I correct? At an early age.
Right. Start saving and investing at an early age.
But a very important component of that investing is developing and controlling a cash flow. Am I correct as well?
Right. We're making decisions because there are always multiple decisions that you can make. That's why we use financial tools to make those decisions. And so it's not just about, I think this is a good decision. You can actually use those tools to make decisions.
Well, let me ask you this. What would you say to that individual who says that, well, I don't have the ability to create cash flow like maybe the middle income or the higher income class of people? The reason why I make that statement is because this is something that I hear quite frequently. Especially from people who feel that they're just working to get by. So at the end of the day, is there a way to create a cash flow even in a stringent financial environment?
Yes. The first thing, supply and demand is basic economics. Economics 101 is supply and demand. So whatever your product is, and I think I touched on that a little bit about the ease of entrance, how it is for someone to enter into the business that you're doing. If you come up with something that's new, and we see it all the time, new inventions or new ideas that just take off, and you have a patent for that idea or invention, then that's one way. But you have to really, if you're going to get into a business, you have to have an idea and research your industry. Don't just sit around and say, well, I have a great idea that I think is going to work. Do an industry analysis.
Okay.
That's the first place. And you can do that. There are several big business magazines that already have a lot of the information. You just have to learn how to do the analysis and figure out what is the market, how does the market look like for whatever I'm going into. And some things are luxury items. We're seeing that a lot of luxury items were affected by the pandemic. So going to a movie is not it's a luxury. Right. Or going to eat out even is a luxury now, but there are certain things that are not luxury. So in those, the things that are luxury are going to be impacted by things like surprises, like a pandemic showing up. And there are people who actually started businesses during this time, like a restaurant business. It was the worst time to start a restaurant. So those are the kind of surprises that you can't really plan for. But you should always think about impact of things like that. How would I be impacted by this happening? You have to think those things through even before you even go into a business. So, and I always think of if you're going to do a business, it has to be something that you have to have. So it's not a luxury item. There's some examples would be and I don't know if you heard this or not, but it's called elasticity.
Right.
So
yes.
things are inelastic. Inelastic means that it's not affected by the price. So water is an example of that. You got to have water in your house. So if the water company decides to raise the price of water, you're not going to say, oh, no, thank you, I don't want the water. You're going to have that, right? So that's inelastic. It's not sensitive to changes in prices. So you have to look at what market that you're going into and make a decision. And I'll always have, think about adjacent ideas that you can go into. So that you're not limited by one idea failing, for instance, the pandemic. So just an example of what was done here, they had in our area and probably where you're at too, they had places that were this place of business, bar or whatever. So they shut them down. And by the way, just for the record, I'm not into that scene anyway. Right. But they had the bars, and they said, well, we're going to shut them down. So what they did, they said, we allow restaurants to be open. Mm-hmm. So they started doing is start selling food. So that was actually, from a business point of view, that was pretty smart on their part to in order to stay open, they started selling food. So you have to always think about that there always are going to be changes that could happen, or what we call surprises that can happen at any point in time that could affect your business. But more so than just business, I want to talk about the personal aspects too, and how to make decisions on your personal finances. So, for instance, T-bills or treasury bills, it's a guaranteed return on those, but the return is low, over the 30-year. And I haven't looked at the recent numbers, but it was anywhere from 2 to 3%, where it varies. So it just depends. But it's low because it's risk-free. So you can count on the government paying back its debt. So if you buy the government debt, they're going to pay it back. It's guaranteed. But then that's considered the risk-free rate. Now, if you wanted to take more risk, if you're not risk adverse, then you can go a different route. You can go into investing in stocks from a corporation, but you're going to take on more risk because those are going to be impacted by changes that happen in the economy. And we're in a global economy now, as we see, the best we can see. So what happens in different parts of the world can impact what happens here in our country. So it is hard to prepare for, but you have to think through all of those scenarios whether it's your personal finance or if you're starting a small business. You have to think about all of the things that could impact your business. And if you're in a luxury type business, you're very vulnerable to any changes that happen in the economy. So you have to think about something that somebody's going to need. That's a good starting point. Find a product or service that everyone needs to have, and then you do your market research determine.
Let me ask you this: what about the person who just wants to work a job? Because I've also run into people who they don't want to create any ideas. They just want to work a 9 to 5. How do they create a cash flow? What is it that they can do to create a cash flow?
Well, they are creating a cash flow if they're working. So the whole concept is to reduce what's going out, what you're paying in your debt, stay away from debt. Yeah. And so the common sense thing is I like to stay away from credit. I don't like paying interest period at all. If I can avoid it, I'll avoid it. But
I agree. As a matter of fact, I have certain guys who I listen to on radio station, financial guys, and they always refer to credit as bondage.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you accumulate enough wealth and time, you can finance a lot of things your own. So you don't have to be in bondage. Right.
Man,
pay yourself back. Always pay yourself.
You're right. You know, I have a friend.
That's number one rule.
Yeah, I have a friend.
Pay yourself first.
What'd you say now?
Yeah, that's basically a good rule to live by. Pay yourself first.